Hi everyone, welcome to our discussion in mathematics in the modern world. In this video, I will be discussing about the different kinds of patterns. As an introduction, as we look at the world around us, we can sense the orchestrating great regularity and diversity of living and non-living things. The symphonies vary from tiny to gigantic, from simple to complex, and from dull to the bright. The kaleidoscope of patterns is everywhere, and they make the nature look not only fascinating, but also intriguing. So paradoxically, it seemed that everything in the world follows a pattern of their own and tamed by the same time pattern of their own. So in simple terms, if we put it that way, or basically, this just means that in the world, there are several or different kinds of patterns, may it be in a large scale or a minuscule scale. So there is pattern everywhere. So now we will be having the different kinds of patterns. So the first one, we have what we call as the patterns of visuals. I'm sorry. Have the patterns of visuals. So it reads as follows. Visual patterns are often unpredictable, never quite repeatable, and often contain fractals. Visual patterns or these patterns can be seen from the seeds and pine cones to the branches and leaves. They are also visible in self-similar replication of trees, ferns, and plants throughout nature. So if you say visual pattern, so it can be related to our sense of sight, the patterns that we see in the world around us. So that's pattern of visuals. Next, we have patterns of flow. So patterns of flow, the flow of liquids provide an exhaustible supply of nature's patterns. Patterns of flows are usually found in the water, in stone, and even in the growth of trees. There's also flow There is also a flow pattern present in meandering rivers with the repetition of undulating lines. So if we say flow, patterns of flow, these are the water we're in, like for example, in the river, it flows continuously, or it can also be seen in growth of plants because there is a certain flow or a way on how it grows. Next is we have patterns of movement. So from the word itself, movement. So in the human walk, the feet strike the ground in a regular rhythm. The left, right, left rhythm. So that's movement. When a horse, a four-legged creature walks, there is more of a complex but equally rhythmic pattern. So this prevalence of pattern in locomotion extends to the scuttling of insects, the flights of birds, the pulsations of jellyfish, and also the wave-like movements of fish, worms, and snakes. So in all living beings, there are certain patterns in how we walk, in how we do our different bodily movements. So for example, in walking, there's a pattern in that there is the left right or the right left pattern. Also, with our hands, whenever we walk, it also moves in conjunction with how we walk. Not just in humans, but also in animals, how they move. For example, the movement of snakes, they move in a certain pattern. Also in birds, how they flap their wings and such, we can also see patterns of movement in those certain actions or movements. Next, we have patterns of rhythm. So rhythm is conceivably the most basic pattern in nature. So our hearts and lungs, take note, hearts and lungs follow a regular repeated pattern of sounds or movements whose timing is adapted to our body's needs. So our heart follows a pattern or a rhythm whenever it pumps blood, whenever it contracts, or whenever it moves. So there is a certain pattern for that designed in order to work for our human body. Also, our lungs, whenever we inhale and exhale air, oxygen, whenever we inhale oxygen, exhale carbon dioxide. So there is also a pattern in terms of its movement, and we call that one patterns of rhythm. Many of nature's rhythms are most likely similar to a heartbeat, while others are like breathing. So our breathing rhythm. So inhale, exhale. So there is a pattern in that. The beating of the heart as well as breathing have a default pattern. So we cannot change how our heart or how our lungs would go about with its rhythm. So that's it. Next, we have patterns of texture. So texture is a quality of a certain object that we sense through touch. So earlier we have patterns of visual, which can be related to our sense of sight. For patterns of texture, it can be felt by our touch, our skin. So it exists as a literal surface that we can feel, we can see at the same time, and imagine. So textures are of many kinds. It can be bristly and rough. It can also be smooth, cold, and hard, depending on the object that we are sensing or we are touching. Next, we have geometric or geometric patterns. So a geometric pattern is a kind of pattern which consists of series of shapes. So series of shapes that are typically repeated. So these are regularities in the natural world that are repeated in a predictable manner. Predictable meaning you'll be able to predict or know what the next object will be. Geometrical patterns are usually visible on cacti and succulents. So if you have heard of plantitas and plantitos, if you see or if you take a look at plants, on the leaves, on the petals, there is a certain geometric pattern to that. So it's a repetition of shapes and objects. Next, we have patterns found in nature because as I've mentioned or talked about in my previous discussion, so mathematics can be seen in the world around us, most especially in nature. Common patterns appear in nature, just like what we see when we look closely at plants, flowers, animals, and even at our bodies. So these common patterns are all incorporated in many natural things. So we have here a visual showing us waves and sand dunes. So a wave is any form of disturbance that carries energy as it moves. So waves are of different kinds. We have mechanical waves which propagate through a medium, air or water, making it oscillate as waves pass by. Wind waves, on the other hand, are surface waves that create the chaotic patterns of the sea. So similarly, water waves are created by energy passing through water, causing it to move in a circular motion. Likewise, ripple patterns and dunes are formed by sand wind as they pass over the sand. So may it be in waves, waves in water, or as waves in the sand dunes, we can see certain types of pattern brought about by movement. It can be caused by the wind. So that's for patterns found in nature. It's naturally occurring. It's not man-made. Next, we have spots and stripes. So we can see patterns like spots on the skin of a giraffe. So in a giraffe, there are it contains or it has spots in its body. On the other hand, stripes are visible in the skin of a zebra. So patterns like spots and stripes that are commonly present in different organisms are results of reaction diffusing system. So the size and the shape of the pattern depend on how fast the chemicals diffuse and how strongly they interact. So those patterns, the spots and the stripes, are caused by certain chemical reactions that occurs in their bodies. Next, we have spirals. So spirals are in this form. So this is an image of the spiral or of a spiral galaxy. So again, it's in that form. The spiral patterns exist on the scale of the cosmos, meaning even on a universal scale, we can see patterns to the minuscule forms of microscopic animals on Earth. The Milky Way, which contains our solar system, so the Milky Way galaxy, if you've heard of that, again, that contains our solar system, is a barred spiral galaxy with a band of bright stars emerging from the center running across the middle of it. Spiral patterns are also common and noticeable among plants and certain animals. So spirals appear in many plants such as pine cones. Are you familiar with pine cones? Pineapples and sunflowers. So there are certain spiral patterns that can be found on those plants. On the other hand, animals like ram and kudu also have spiral patterns on their horns. So have you seen a ram? So its horn are in a spiral pattern. Next, we have what we call as symmetries. So in mathematics, if a figure can be folded or divided into two with two halves which are the same, take note, such figure is called a symmetric figure. Symmetry has a vital role in pattern formation. It is used to classify and organize information about patterns by classifying the motion or deformation of both pattern structure and processes. There are many kinds of symmetry, and the most important ones are reflections, take note, reflections, rotations, and translations, which we will be discussing further later. These kind of symmetries are less formally called flips. So flips, turns, and slides. Let's start with the first one. We have the reflection symmetry. So sometimes called the line symmetry. It's another way of calling reflection symmetry, line symmetry, or mirror symmetry. Capture symmetry when the left half of a pattern is the same as the right half. So if we take a look at this butterfly, if we divide that image into two, the left side and the right side are the same, or it's just simply a mirror of each other. So next we have rotations. Rotations, also known as rotational symmetry, It captures symmetries when it still looks the same after some rotation of less than one full turn. The degree of rotational symmetry of an object is recognized by the number of distinct orientations in which it looks the same for each rotation. So let's take, for example, this flower. So if I rotate my screen, wait, where is that? So there, wait, sorry. So yeah, I rotate that there. So the flower will still look the same, even if we rotated it a number of times. So that's rotational symmetry. Next, we have translations. So this is another type of symmetry. Translational symmetry exists in patterns that we see in nature and in man-made objects. It can be natural in form or it can be man-made. Translations acquire symmetries when units are repeated and turn out having identical figures, like the bee's honeycomb with hexagonal tiles. So translation is when shapes are being repeated. So same with the beehive or the honeycomb. It's like a repetition of several or various hexagonal figure. Hexagonal meaning it's a figure with 6 sides. Next, let's proceed. Symmetry still in nature. So from the structure of subatomic particles to that of the entire universe, symmetry is present. The presence of symmetries in nature does not only attract our visual sense, but also plays an integral and prominent role in the way our life works. So let's have this example, the human body. So the human body is one of the pieces of evidence that there is symmetry in nature. Our body exhibits bilateral symmetry. It can be divided into two identical halves. So we have here an image or a picture of the human body. Now, if we divide that into two, I'm sorry, the line is not straight. But yeah, if we divide that into two, what is on the left side will be the same, or the image that we see on the left will be identical with what is on the right. Next, we have animal movement. So the symmetry of motion is present in animal movements. When animals move, we can see that their movements also exhibit symmetry. So here is an example of kangaroos. Now, there is symmetry in their movement, especially when they jump. So they jump like they move in the same way. Next, we have the sunflower. So actually, I like or I love sunflowers. So one of the most interesting things about a sunflower is that it contains both radial and bilateral symmetry. So what happens to be petals in the outer ring are actually small flowers. So if you zoom or you take a close look at it, these are also known as ray florets. These small flowers are bilaterally symmetrical. So if you take a petal and fold that into two, it's actually it has a bilateral symmetry, since what's on the left will be what's the same on the right. On the other hand, the dark inner ring of the sunflower is a cluster of radially symmetrical disc. So radial in a sense that it is in a circular motion or a circular pattern. Next, we have snowflakes. So snowflakes have 6-fold radial symmetry. The ice crystals that make up the snowflakes are symmetrical or patterned. The intricate shape of a single arm of a snowflake is very much similar to the other arms. This only proves that symmetry is present in a snowflake. So the snowflake's pattern, it's radial, meaning circular, and it is 6-fold. So it can be divided into 6 equal parts. So just like this one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and whatever is on one part will be the same with the other remaining parts. And there is, I think I've read it somewhere or heard it somewhere that snowflakes have or has a certain unique pattern. So there are no two snowflakes that are the same. But what's interesting is that it has a certain pattern. It's a radial pattern, and it is a six-fold radial symmetry. Next, we have honeycombs or the beehive. So honeycombs or beehives are examples of wallpaper symmetry. This kind of symmetry is created when a pattern is repeated until it covers a plane. So beehives are made of walls with each side having the same size enclosed with small hexagonal cells. So inside these cells, honey and pollen are stored and bees are raised. So it's a wallpaper symmetry because the pattern is repeating. It's the same one. So beehives are, again, just like what I have mentioned earlier, it's composed of hexagonal shapes and figures. Next, we have the starfish. So a starfish have a radial five-fold symmetry. So each arm, a portion of the starfish is identical to each of the other the other regions. So radial meaning circular, and it has 5 identical parts, 4 regions. And lastly, we have Fibonacci in nature. So Fibonacci, this is a famous mathematician. So his life works is devoted on patterns that he has seen and observed in nature. So by learning about nature, it becomes gradually evident that nature is essentially mathematical. So it may not be numbers, but it is somehow visual in nature. And this is one of the reasons why explaining nature is dependent on mathematics. So mathematics is the power to unveil the inherent beauty of the natural world. So just like what I've mentioned in my first video, that mathematics is an art because nature itself shows and depicts beauty. In describing the amazing variety of phenomena in nature, we stumbled to discover the existence of Fibonacci numbers. It turns out that the Fibonacci numbers appear from the smallest up to the biggest objects in the natural world. This presence of Fibonacci numbers in nature, which once existed in the realm of mathematicians' curiosity, is considered, this presence of Fibonacci numbers in nature, which was once existed realm mathematicians curiously, is considered as one of the biggest mysteries why some patterns in nature is Fibonacci. But one thing is definitely made certain, and what seemed solely mathematical is also nature. So for instance, many flowers display figures adorned with number of petals that are in the Fibonacci sequence. So the classic 5-petal flowers are said to be the most common amongst them. These include the buttercup. So these are different types of flowers that display the Fibonacci sequence. So the Fibonacci somehow looks like this. But we will be discussing the Fibonacci sequence further in the next lesson. Columbine and the hibiscus. So aside from those flowers with 5 petals, 8-petal flowers like clematis and delphinium also have Fibonacci numbers, while ragwort and marigold have 13. So these numbers are all Fibonacci numbers. So Fibonacci has a pattern of 1, so that's 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, and so on. So we will get the Fibonacci sequence by simply adding the two previous numbers. So 1 and 1, that's 2, 1 and 2, that's 3, 2 and 3, that's 5, 5 and 3, that's 8. Apart from the counts of flower petals, the Fibonacci also occurs in Nautilus shells with a logarithmic spiral growth. Multiple Fibonacci spirals are also present in pineapples and red cabbages. The patterns are all consistent and natural, which makes it very interesting since the Fibonacci sequence occurs in a variety of things, creatures, plants, flowers, and other stuffs that can be seen in nature. So for the Fibonacci, we'll be having a more detailed discussion regarding that one in the next discussion. So I think the module or the topic is very understandable since it only involves concepts. But if ever you have questions, if ever you have clarifications, you are always free to ask in the comment section below. So that's it for patterns, the different kinds of patterns that we see in nature. Thank you so much for your time and for listening. You take care always. Bye bye for now.